right, yay, we're back with part 2 with Veronica. Ugh, I'm so excited to have you here again. And I'm going to read your bio again just to kind of refresh folks' memory and reintroduce you. Veronica Agard is a poet, writer, community educator, and connector at the intersections of Black identity, wellness, representation, and culture. She experiments with creative healing modalities and puts theories learned into practice. She curated the Who Heals the Healer series and the conference of the same name, and facilitates the Ancestors in Training educational project. Her initiatives are housed in her freelance platform, Vera Icon, LLC. Described as living in the future, Veronica is guided by the past and carries out her dreams in the present. Welcome back, Veronica. I'm so happy to have you.
Thanks so much for having me back. I'm glad that we were able to do part 2. Really looking forward to picking up where we left off.
Yes, same. So, will you share again with folks your pronouns and where you're joining us from today?
Yeah, sure. So I am calling from Ramapo Lenape land, which is known currently as Rockland County, New York, specifically Airmont. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also known as Ifa Shadun for Sanmi in my tradition. And like I talked about in the last time, I was like, I normally have my little nameplate. I have it on this time because I'm prepared for when folks see the video.
Nice.
And then also, what's helpful to know? This is very much like a white on white background right now. I'm in my whites in a very like pale colored room with
I
some
love
like
it.
slightly religious stuff behind me because I'm in my grandmother's room.
I love it.
But yeah.
Cute. I know it's very peaceful vibes. Yeah. Yeah. So, for those of you who have not watched the Intersectional Fertility Podcast episodes, you can access those in our free community. So, you can find that on my Instagram profile at Intersectional Fertility or on my website, intersectionalfertility.com, and just click on community and you can join the free community and watch all these episodes. And you can enable captions if you need as well. So, last time, kind of where we left off, we were talking about our responsibility as ancestors in training, as people on a fertility journey, and having this responsibility of bringing in this next generation and kind of acting as that bridge, something that you talk about as being like that bridge between ancestors and descendants. And I just love thinking about that through the lens of fertility and bringing that in. Um, so we talked about, I loved one of the things that you said that I absolutely loved was that it's not enough to talk about what we're not going to do with this next generation, but what cycles are we going to start? How are we going to change things, basically? Um, and yeah, I love that, and kind of a part of what you said with that was like, our responsibility. Part of our responsibility is living our truths so that our descendants after us can live their truth. So, yeah, anything more to say around that we didn't get to?
Yeah, I mean, I on social media I see very often that, and I don't know when this happened, but somewhere in the beginning of the pandemic, like everybody was forced to sit with a lot of different things, right?
Yeah.
Um, I overall wish it did not take a whole pandemic for people to do that. I really wish it did not involve a whole bunch of loss of life, loss of ways of being, trauma,
Mhm.
all the things, right? Like speaking of epigenetics and like future generations. I was like, yeah, we're definitely, because even in some of my conversations with my friends and my family, I'll be like, oh yeah, that was last summer. And I'm talking about like summer 2019. That was not last summer, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
like that's a silly example, but I'm just like, okay, if it's messing or, it's making my brain a little extra squiggly around time and like space and like what that is. The good news is I'm already like, okay, what is time anyway? Like
Right.
I'm like, before we started recording, I named that I'm going to be 33, probably close to the time when this comes out
Yes.
on the
Yay.
21st. I'm a solstice baby, and like very much like, I'm still, young enough where like I'll be like, ma, like help, like to my mom for like something that really doesn't need her help. I just want her help.
Totally.
And
Oh,
then
yeah.
and then being you know, having the privilege of aged enough, especially in this moment with everything that's happening in Palestine,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the Congo and South Sudan and Sudan, like just, and unfortunately, there's a long list of places that I can talk about right now, and I hate
Yeah.
that. Um, but the thing about aging, I'm like, it's a gift because there are people that did not long enough
Mm-hmm.
in very recent memory to like
Yeah.
get a grace shriek right where my mom has it.
Yeah.
Except then also my dad's genetics are like kicking in, so I have like a triple situation. Like I have one streak here, I've got like little baby, distinguished fake sideburns that are trying to come in, and I'm just like, bro, I know genetics are a thing, and again, bro is used in gender neutral here, but like I'm just like, what is going on? But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
little things like that, I'm like, okay, what is time? Like I've aged old long enough to look like my parents did at this age, which is wild. And
Totally.
thinking about, especially in the sense of like their journey of like having me, like I'll be 33. My parents were 30 and 31 when they had me. So
Wow.
I'm like, I would have been like a little I would have been either in the terrible twos or the three. Like just very
Totally.
much like I would have been a toddler, like running around and all the things. And I'm very much like, wow, I can't imagine that, because this whole idea of like having our stuff together at any given point, um, the more that I age, the more that I'm like, wow, like my parents like really were figuring stuff out on the fly. Like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
parents are, and like these whole expectations of like, you got to do this and you got to do this, and it has to be by the letter and to the T. And especially because um, I'll be 33. So like 90s babies, like we were definitely those kind of, we were the kids that our parents like had to read the books about and like all the things, and had this person telling that person how to raise their kids, and like a whole bunch
Mm-hmm.
of, experimentation. And some of it was good and then some of it was not. Right.
Right.
So I
Right.
think that I say all that to say that one of the things that I saw and continue to see is the conversations about cycle breaking, right? I believe Dr. Muriel Bouquet has a book that, if it's not out yet, it's about to be out. Um, she was one of the first people that I saw with her tea talks, and she literally sits and gets a cup of tea, and like she, talks
Oh,
about
cute.
some of the things that she sees with her therapy clients, or some of the things that, some of the conversations that should or should not happen. And I think that those little viral clips, and I don't say little to diminish the work,
Mm-hmm.
I say little
Yeah.
because they're very short.
Gotcha.
um I think that that is a part of how she and others have really sparked conversations around cycle breaking,
Mm.
um and also cycle generation. I'm also thinking about the conversation I had with now friend in my head, Cynthia of Rooted in Reflection, right, who does a lot of inner child work.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And that's a part of her bread and butter. And I'm also thinking about Brujas of Brooklyn, who have been doing a lot of cycle breaking day long type festivities where they invite other people in. So I think
Cool.
that the good news is the pandemic times, and this time of year in the northern hemisphere of um, a lack of daylight, right? Like we lose daylight, the days are short, the
Mm-hmm.
nights are long. The
Yeah.
days are short, the nights are long, in that kind of nighttime space.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the pandemic was a big nighttime space,
Totally.
and still is. And I don't
Yeah.
want to say was to mean like
Right.
it's not still happening. It's
Right.
definitely still is.
For sure.
But the big part of it, or the, when everything was shut down seemingly, I think
Mm-hmm.
that that was a big nighttime for a lot of people. It was a big invitation to do shadow work, to think about cycle breaking, to think about things that they want to start, as opposed to focusing on the negative. Because it's not that we can't focus on what we want to change or what we want to interrupt. I think that that's important. But I
Mm-hmm.
also think that it's just as, if not more important, to be able to utilize our imagination in a radical sense, to actually think
Yeah.
about the things that we want to generate, and
Yeah.
the worlds that we want to be a part of, and what's possible, right? Because a lot
Yes.
of the the global conflict that's happening right now, and unfortunately what will happen just
Mhm.
because we're swimming in the things and hypercapitalism and neocolonialism and all the things.
Yep.
That means because we're experiencing it and we're witnessing it, that means that somebody created it.
Mhm.
And that means that if somebody created it, that means that it can be undone, or something that can be something can be invited instead, right?
Mm.
I'm thinking specifically in, and this goes with ancestral things, a little too on the nose actually, and I haven't talked about this yet, so this is actually the perfect space to talk about it. My grandfather was born in the area that Venezuela is trying to annex. Um, my grandfather was born in Essequibo, Guyana, which is the region where a lot of the indigenous folks who at Guyana are a part of. Basically, the 2/3. If you're watching this and you don't know what I'm talking about, the quick version is um, Venezuela is going through what it's going through. It's trying to gather resources. A lot of people, from what I can see, are um, struggling, for lack of better term. That's
Mhm.
actually an oversimplification.
Mhm.
But like many a colonizing force, Venezuela is taking something out of the playbook.
Mhm.
And what they're doing is that they're going to try and do a land grab. If this sounds familiar to what's happening in Palestine, again, same playbook, right? We're
Right.
living in a time where we can see people picking stuff up from the playbook and being like, wait, what?
Right.
Didn't we learn that allegedly, didn't we learn from them? Like, oh, word. Okay. That's why when y'all talk about post colonialism, I'm like, haha.
Right.
Anyway, so,
Right.
um, the region that the president of Venezuela tried to not tried to is attempting to annex from Guyana is two it basically takes up 2/3 of what Guyana actually is.
Wow.
And in the sense of colonization wasn't that long ago, and the sun never set on the British Empire. Guyana is it borders Venezuela. um I believe Suriname is on the right side of it, and then Brazil is underneath, and then
Mhm.
Trinidad is right next door. Guyana culturally is a part of the West Indies or the Caribbean, because it was colonized by the British.
Mhm.
So a lot of folks there are African descended or South Asian descended, right? A descent. So what that means is you're either a descendant of folks who were indentured or
Mhm.
folks who were enslaved, right?
Right.
Both lineages are really complicated, and there's already a lot going on with trying to reconcile those lineages. And also, there's indigenous folks, there's folks who are recent immigrants from big diaspora, a lot of diasporic folks that that call their place home.
Mhm.
And Guyana is only they only gained their independence in 1966.
Wow.
So they're a very young country
Yeah.
trying to figure it out and do the things in spite of what was done to them. And then here
Mhm.
comes Venezuela being like, "Phew," and I'm like, because the thing is, especially in the sense of the quote that I say all the time, like when our descendants look to the challenges of our times, what are they going to say that we did? One of the
Mhm.
things that they're going to say that we did is to have conversations like these, to like sow the seeds and like draw the lines of connectivity, right? Even if it's just like what I just did, like that's enough, right?
Right.
Because sometimes people aren't even talking about it. But then
Mhm.
ancestrally, the wild part of that is that this actually is a part of like the ancestors in training origin story, because what I'm about to talk about is a part of the reason why I got curious about like ancestry and ancestral veneration in the first place, in addition to what I said in the last episode, because my grandparents split up when my dad was very little. The last time we saw, and by we I mean my late grandmother and my dad,
Mhm.
saw my grandfather was in Georgetown, Guyana.
Mm.
And the region that has been annexed, um, you essentially cross the Essequibo River, and like that's where it starts. So this line that is being drawn is like right near the capital of Guyana.
Wow.
And the question now becomes, since we're living in a time where people are continuing to do what they did in the historical or the recent past, where they're fighting over resources,
Mm-hmm.
um, and somebody said it years ago that the future wars are going to be over water,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So
Totally.
I wish I remembered who said it. Shout out to
Yeah.
that person.
Yeah.
I also studied international studies, so like all of the things come up when I'm thinking about these kind of things, and I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, word. Like the Essequibo region has some of the best resources that have been untouched. It's a similar thing to um, what was happening and still is happening in Brazil, where they're trying to take care of the indigenous stewards now to counteract what was done in the past president, who was like their version of Trump.
Uh-huh.
Um, so, like, all of the ways in which things are interconnected because the world is smaller, right? Because we know what's going on at a click, right? Because we have access to these things, I think that it's our responsibility to, and this is a dance, right? To stay as informed as feels good to you, but
Mm-hmm.
also to not put your head in the sand either, to find ways to plug in, to find ways to show up, right? Like, I
Right.
think for me, the Guyana case specifically is challenging for me because I've always wanted to go. And especially every time I go to Brazil, I'm like, yo, I really need to make a stop.
Yeah.
Um, but because now I'm like, damn, I don't know if I can go see the land that birthed my grandfather safely,
Mm-hmm.
or not yet, and like
Right.
thinking about it that way in the sense of like, on a literal sense of like how we got here, of like me being able to exist in this form that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm like, okay, well, if this series of events didn't happen, then like if my grandmother didn't split from my grandfather, bring my dad and my uncle to New York, then my parents wouldn't have met at college, and then I wouldn't exist. Or I might
Right.
exist, but I might exist in a different combination, whatever.
Right.
Um, Understanding that these times that we're living in, and especially like these kind of nighttime spaces of like things that have been done in the dark that are coming out into the light, really, it's an invitation to find those kind of nighttime spaces within yourself. And again, I say
Mm-hmm.
invitation because everything is rooted in consent. Like, I
Yeah.
could say all of this wonderful stuff and someone's like, nah, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
completely fair. That is completely like,
Totally.
I don't want somebody to listen to this and be like, well, Veronica said this. Da, 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 da. Like, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Invitation. I'm not like being like boop over
Yes.
somebody's head. We're to umu around consent within care, right? Like, just
Yes.
very much like, this is what it is, this is what it could be. But I also
Mm-hmm.
think that like that is also like super generative and like cycle breaking and like something for our descendants too, right? Like around, and also parenting and like caregiving as well around like um especially during the holiday season of like not forcing children to give that person a hug, right? And like
Totally.
I hate that, like
Me
that is
too.
a, I hate that that's so universal of a thing that we all kind of get it when we hear that
Mm-hmm.
of like that one person. Now obviously there was probably some trauma and some things and people didn't have the language or the tools to take care of the person, so then it just perpetuated.
Right.
um, right, like those are some cycles that we want to interrupt. So I think that's
Yes.
some of the work that like the folks that I just named, like Dr. Bouquet, Umu, and Cynthia, others, like all of us, like you as well, like we're all interrupting some of those things and then we're creating
Mm-hmm.
something instead, right? We're
Right.
creating podcasts, we're creating literature, where um like we're going to do, and I'm going to speak it into existence, we're going to reach our fundraiser goal for the ancestors and training deck, and that's
Yes.
a thing, that's something that people can hold in their hands, right? And I think that that really came from a space of being like, all right, like having this platform. It's not that it doesn't mean anything, but it felt very much like if I can't activate it in a way, like for these kind of times, then what am I doing?
Right.
And like going very much back to the drawing board of like, Okay, like figure out what to do. Okay, how can you, okay, you're not hosting events right now because LOL at hosting events, like, but can you share something?
Mhm.
That's how we ended up getting publicly anyway the prompts. So for folks that see it on social media, like oh my god, I'm like, that's just what I used to use and still use in circles in ceremony. So anybody who knows or has attended any of my workshops, you get prompts, you get all the things, you get all the stuff that's written. Instagram is only seeing what I've been doing for the past 6 going on 7 years. Like I'm
Mhm.
only just like over the past year, I literally a year ago switched some of the format of the posts. People are like, oh my God. And I'm like, yo, like it's for me. I'm like, yo, this is what it's been. Like,
Right.
welcome. Like everybody is welcome. Come on in the room. But just know that this is not some of these questions aren't new. In fact, they're actually kind of old. And then part of me is like, I should make new stuff. And then I'm like, no, get off of the, again, word to Umu, get off the productivity escalator. Like just very
Yes.
much like, no, just
Yep.
replicate the things, put the things out there. If it resonates, it resonates. As my friend Jessica, whose birthday is also coming up soon, would say, whatever is clever. Like
Yes. I love it.
whatever feels good.
Totally.
But yeah, that's something that's basically what's been on my mind since we last spoke. And I think I wrapped all that up to say that I think because I'm a solstice baby, I was born on December 21st, which means I was born on the longest night of the year. Energetically, I think that's a part of the reason why I'm comfortable talking about some of the things that are either deeper or like dredge up a lot of things. Like for me, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like we got to talk about it, kiki, right? Like even if I'm kikiing about it, like it's coming from a place of like, okay, well, I don't want to cry about it anymore. I've already done that, right? Like I've already grieved the things, and I'm saying that honoring that not everybody moves that way, or like some of the things that I want to talk about are too deep, right? But then the other part of me is like, my lineage and going all the way back to my grandfather on my paternal side, like the Essequibo River is like one of the deepest rivers in the world. So
Wow.
energetically, I'm just like,
Yeah.
yeah, of course I'm deep because like the lands that I
Yeah.
come from are also deep. Like that
Yes.
tracks. Like,
I love that. That's so cool.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I love how far back you took that and seeing the whole picture of your grandfather and yeah, incredible. Um so something I love that I read from you is saying something that you said was um what does love as intergenerational wealth feel like? And when I read that, that just like stopped me in my tracks. I was like, "Oh, wow." Like can we imagine like how powerful that is for a second? Um, and is this how we shape a better future? Like, is that it? You know, what does love as intergenerational wealth feel like? Is that, yeah, I would love to just kind of talk more about that.
yeah, that was one of those. What was it? Like 3 a.m. witching hour, ancestor hour type. Like woke up, like wanted a snack, and was like, hold on. Like I wrote it down. I was like, sometimes, like honestly, like I wish there was a, like I know with social media and like influencer marketing or whatever, like everyone's like, do this and batch the content and like, and I believe in like batching content so that way you have room for other things. But then the other part of me is like some of the like the ones that stop people in their tracks, as you just said, are like random ass, like random but not random, like
Yeah,
ancestors word, like knock knock, like
totally.
off my head.
Totally.
And I think that I'm thinking about that, especially in terms of legacy building, because like because I'm surrounded by fellow Sagittarius. My grandmother's birthday is at the time of this recording on this coming Saturday.
Oh,
So that means December 16th, and she'll be 87,
wow.
and she still drives. She's actually at work right now, which is
Oh
why
my
I'm able to
gosh.
like take over her room. She still drives, like all the things. And
Amazing.
thinking about legacy building in that regard of like things that have been passed down over generations, or thinking about being at an age where people are starting to talk about estate planning, and
Mm-hmm.
not in a like something is happening right now, everybody is fine, but talking about it in a key of since everybody is fine, let us have these conversations now so that way when the time comes, like it makes more space for people to grieve, as
Right.
opposed to grieving and trying to pay things off, or grieving
Yeah.
and having to sell certain things or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
like those are all very much like all of those things are rooted in money, like
Mm-hmm.
capitalism, the
Yep.
traditional kind of thing, and like how expensive it is, like
Yeah.
to like bury people, or
Yes.
even animals. I
Yeah.
also like have lost one of my childhood cats, and that was a whole thing of like grief and like thinking about the past 18 years of my life and like legacy building and like a legacy of love. And my kitty Bonnie, she was very much a rambunctious, like into everything, would play with herself, would like grab this like one of those like hanging stringy toys that the human would put up like
Yeah.
this. She would grab it herself and like play, literally play, like tumble with herself,
Oh.
come and give it to somebody, have it in her mouth, talking about meow, and like be like, play with me.
Right.
So thinking
Cute.
about like a legacy of that, of like she's very like what does that legacy look like? And I'm saying this like the witch in me is like, that was my familiar, a very much like um that kind of love of like our chosen communities and our families, and like fuzzy family included, but then also thinking about it in the sense of like conversations with my mom, who ended up being the primary custodian of the cats when I went away to college. And I say went away like I went far, like, but I didn't. And when Bonnie passed, like one of the first things that people asked my mom was if she's gonna get another cat. And I was like, bro, I was like, we literally just buried her. Like, this is
Yeah.
kind of weird.
Right.
And my mom rightfully said, she was like, no, like when the cats are gone, I don't think I can get cats again, because it's 2023, she'll be 64, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the cats live to 18. So she's thinking, okay,
Right.
when I'm in my 80s, I don't know if I'm going to be able to care for these
Right.
animals the way that I would want to. And
Yeah.
also, shout out to my mom for thinking like that, because not
Yeah.
everybody might. Um, I don't know if I'm going to get another cat anytime soon, only because I don't know where I'm going to be living. Speaking of
Sure.
like legacy building and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that when we talk about love as like a, for lack of better word, like a currency or an inheritance or things that people can give, I think that one of the things that we can think about is like, how do we want to be remembered, and like finding pockets for people to have like reverence or remembrance in a way that is not just the traditional grieving, not just the um the stereotype of when somebody passes away and you find out all the secrets and all the things, and or find family members, like that has happened to me, unfortunately and fortunately. When my paternal grandmother passed away, like I found a whole other like section of the tree, and I was like,
Wow.
hello, like
Right.
where have y'all, like, it's like and like that kind of intergenerational work of um having some healing conversations with and across like generations, but then also listening. I think that love as intergenerational wealth can look like the younger generations like holding space for some of the edges of growth that our elders have, especially depending on their lineage. Like, I'll speak for the Black diaspora. We will edit. I'll speak as a child of the Black diaspora, not
Mm-hmm.
for.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, that's a bit. I was like, girl, it's like,
I knew what you meant.
I was like, I don't want somebody. Veronica, who are you speaking for? So as a whole, like as a daughter of the Black diaspora, but specifically the Caribbean diaspora and the Southern Black tradition, neither one of those in recent memory really talked about mental health. Um, Not just in the sense of like care, but like aftercare or challenges and things that got passed down, things that are hereditary, things that might not be hereditary, and they might be environmental, right? Going back to epigenetics.
Right.
Because we in this present moment are the generation that is talking about it, that is a form of wealth, that is a form of currency. Because if
Mm.
we are parents, or if we, we have nibblings, we have, the next generation in our lives, then they're going to see us talking about these things in a way that our parents or our caregivers might not have. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe not because they didn't want to, but just because they didn't have the language, because people weren't talking about it.
Right.
Especially in the histories that I come from, people were trying to survive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother is a part of the generation that had to do the Great Migration to the North because of the KKK and them running around in Alabama in the 60s, because everybody was listening to Dr. King and Malcolm X and young John Lewis, like rest in peace to all of those folks. Rosa
Mm-hmm.
Parks was about to sit at the back of the bus, like sit in the front of the bus as opposed to the back. Like,
Right.
there were so many things happening in that flashpoint that made it so that way. And I've talked about this before, but made it so that way my grandmother couldn't talk about being able to have a connection with the land or have a connection with nature or have a connection with spirits, because there just wasn't any time for it, right?
Totally.
Because people were
Yeah.
trying to survive. She was trying to like help raise my mom and my two aunts, like just very much like had stuff to do. She
Yeah.
also made time for her activism though, which I love about her. But
Amazing.
so I say that to say there's so much that, like, that kind of intergenerational compassion, I also think is a form of
Mm.
wealth or a
Mm.
gift. Because even my grandmother said to me, because she every now and again will crash something ancestors and training related, um and she said to me one time, and it stuck with me ever since, and that's why I'm like, I apologize, fake apologize if I've said this before, but she said to me that she's glad that I do this work because it gives language to something that she felt as a kid,
Mm.
or when it comes to her spirituality and like being able to see spirits. Like, she apparently saw spirits as a young kiddo
Wow.
in 40s, 50s rural Alabama, but
Wow.
didn't have the language for it.
Right.
So then now me talking about like, oh, okay, like you should find a mentor, you should find this, like here's this book, here's this resource, here's this thing, do 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 do. That's the context in which she said it. She was like, you're naming things, or you're suggesting people, or you're weaving things in a way around ancestors and spirituality that is directly impacting her little self, right?
Wow.
So I think that that's also like a form of um generational wealth that doesn't require somebody to pass away. Because I think
Yeah.
sometimes in the United States context specifically, when we think about legacies and
Mm-hmm.
wealth and inheritances, we think about it requiring that somebody has passed, or
Right.
like some kind of like that grief is a prerequisite to um love as generational wealth. And I'm like, no, like we shouldn't wait until somebody becomes an ancestor. If that's the antecedent, yes, but also like
Right.
grief as the antecedent. And I know I talked about this when I wrote for Heritage Journal. It's called Care Beyond a Crisis. And I essentially asked what I'm about to ask, which is it possible for us to think about love as generational wealth without there being some kind of tragedy as like the antecedent?
Yeah.
Or
Totally.
not the antecedent, that's the after the precedent, excuse me. Y'all knew what I meant, but anyway.
Yes, I did. I did. Yeah. Yeah. I thought that that's what that meant, but now
um
that you say that,
no, I
yeah,
was
that
like,
makes sense.
so precedent as in like it came before, so it's like an
Okay.
ante as in after, I think.
Okay.
um
Okay.
English teachers out there, don't get mad at me.
Yeah,
Basically, like
totally.
I wish that it didn't require something horrible
Right.
happening for us to consider that. That's what
Right,
I'm
right.
trying to say. Then, like,
Totally.
I wrote about it in the context of like hurricane season in the Caribbean and everything that happened and is still happening with Puerto Rico in respect to Hurricane Maria. Um, that I wish that it didn't take hurricanes for us to care about what's happening to
Right.
other people. Or in
Right.
this case, right now, I wish it didn't take seeing thousands of people dying for us to care about what's happening in Palestine
Exactly.
or the
Yeah.
Congo or Sudan or the wildfire hurricane combo in Hawaii, which
Mhm.
that was not on my bingo card at all. I was like a hurricane and a wildfire. I was like, what? But
Right.
again, nature's gonna do what she's gonna do. We're just gonna have to,
Totally.
adjust. But I wish that
Yeah.
we would adjust in a way that did not cause harm
Yeah.
to other people. And I think that that's my circular question when we think about love as a currency. I'm like, okay, but hate, because everything is on a spectrum, right? So like hate and harm and like all these other kind of things are floating out there, they're existing. And I
Yeah.
just wish that like it did not take those kind of harmful things happening. But then I'm also reminded that grief is just love without anywhere to go.
Mm.
I don't know who said that either,
I
but
love
somebody
that.
somebody smart said that.
Yeah.
It's like I don't. I believe in citations, so it kills me when I
I
don't
know.
remember. I'm like, no, who said
Totally. I
this?
get it.
Um,
Yeah, same. Yes, I love that. And I love intergenerational compassion. I love that concept. That's so beautiful. Yeah, and that it shouldn't require, grief or something, some big tragedy to, yeah, to make that happen for us to have that awareness. I love that. Um, okay, another one that I saw that I loved that you put out there into the world was whenever we're in conversation with our bodies, we're in conversation with our ancestors.
that
And
was a
this,
good one too.
yes, right? Such a good one. And when I read that, I was like, that felt so true to me, especially when I was on my fertility journey in particular. Being more in touch with my body than ever before, and sometimes in very uncomfortable ways. Um, so, yeah, will you talk more about that concept and how it could potentially affect someone as they're trying to conceive?
Yeah, so I have not been diagnosed with this, but I suspect I have PCOS. Um, I mainly say that because going back to the pandemic and the big nighttime episode, I put on weight like a lot of people did. I'm gonna say it like this: I have a conventionally desirable body
Mm-hmm.
as a cishet woman, like mainly cishet, but like as a desirable body. Like most of my weight is like at my waist, around my hips, chest, booty, all those kind of things.
Uh huh.
But within the context of my health, like the challenge therein is like, okay, I really need to be moving more. I really need to be able to like not get winded. Like not that I do, but like the challenge with that is like my job prior to the pandemic was in person
Mm-hmm.
working with young people, which meant that I was, in a high school running up and down the stairs like zigzag, wore sneakers to work, got my steps in all the time,
Right.
didn't
Right.
worry about my weight. And if I did, I was just, I was having a human moment.
Right.
Now it's very much like, oh, I work from home. I need to really find ways to get back into my body. And I think that that's something that, and I'm not planning on having children anytime soon. I'm doing this question mark because um, what is it, when you tell God or the creator you have a plan, they laugh. So that's why
Yeah.
I'm looking around like
Yeah.
unless there's something unless something's gonna radically happen within the next year, I don't think that's gonna happen anyway.
Right.
But I say that to say I think that something that I'm seeing from my friends who and my peers that are parents or expecting, like when folks are planning, like I've seen people try to get healthier whatever
Mm-hmm.
that looks like for them,
Mm-hmm.
in anticipation of carrying a life.
Mm-hmm.
I've also seen and have friends that are parents that were told, like, I have a couple of like play nieces and nephews that were not supposed to be here
Uh-huh.
because their mothers were told that it was going to be difficult for them to conceive and carry,
Right. Right.
because they had PCOS. And I think that, um, for me, I have that awareness, and especially now as I'm thinking about, like some of the things I want to do for 33 and like where I want to be. And I'm like, all right, I definitely want to be a little bit more active. And what does that look like? And the kind of planning that goes into that. So for me, I'm like, I'm not in a space of preparing for a kiddo, but if I was, I can only imagine, because if it's taking me like this kind of, okay, do this, don't do this, drink more water, folks. That's 90% of what the folks are going to tell you to do.
Right, right.
Um, um, and trying to be in conversation with my body more requires that I remember what my body likes,
Mm,
right?
I love that.
And in this case, in the exercising and the fitness take, my body likes being tricked. We don't like being told lift things up, put things down, lift things up, put things down. That doesn't work. Like, I
Mm,
might be neurospicy. I probably am. I don't know. It doesn't work for me, right?
yeah.
And I know what doesn't work for me. Even if I know I could do circuit training, I could do this, I could do this, like random stuff I retained from high school, from weight class. I don't know why I retained that. I'm like, out of all the things from high school, bro, really? So, but I like dance. I like music. I am known to know where the party is, even if I'm not always there. Like, so for me, I'm like, all right, that's already in my nature. It's already
Mm,
in conversation with my body. That already is in alignment with one of the aspects of my primary orisha, Shango, is like the bembe, the drum, right, and the party and the festivities, and like
yeah.
being in the, not necessarily being in the mix, but like finding that kind of joy. So then for me, I'm like, all right, then I need to try. I can empathize with folks that are planning on conceiving, because if I have to do all of that to take care of my health and I'm not trying to conceive, I can only imagine that it's that. And you got to take this prenatal thing. You got to do this. You got to do this. You got to talk about whether you want a home birth or a birth at the hospital.
Right.
I'm like, I know enough to know that like there's there's a lot
Yes.
that goes into that.
It's a lot.
Um,
Yeah.
do you want a doula? Do you want a midwife? Do you not? Do you want both? What kind of
Mm-hmm.
doula do you want? What kind of midwife do you want? I'm fortunate where I know a lot of doulas and midwives, and have so much admiration and respect for them, because and I might have said this in the last time, but if I didn't, I'll say it again. I have a lot of respect for them because they help literally catch the next generation, and doctors
Totally.
too, as long as they're, not causing harm,
Yes.
that Hippocratic oath is still a thing.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Totally. And I just want to like tie in that piece of the ancestors. Like, how is communicating with our bodies, communicating with our ancestors?
yeah, because we're literally a whimsical combination of all the ancestors that ever lived, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good, bad, somewhere in between,
Right.
not in a binary kind of way, or like on a spectrum. And I think
Mm-hmm.
for me, there was also another trend spotted on TikTok where it ages people up, like, or it does a projection of what they're going to look like. The ones that got me are the ones where people said, "Oh, I look like this person who passed away."
Oh, totally.
Like, I look like my
Yes.
dad, I look like my grandma, I look like whoever, and I'm just like, wait, I wasn't ready
Yeah.
to be emotional, and like I run right off, I run
Yeah.
right off to TikTok. I'll save it and be like, what is this? Um,
Right.
and actually, at my friend Chiquita Brujita's festival, she had a lot of different artisans and people that were there, and one of the people that was there did intuitive portraits,
Mm.
watercolors.
Cool.
Um, the watercolor that this person did, it looks like my late grandmother,
Whoa.
except it's me. And I was like, what the the hell is this? I
Wow.
love it. But I was also just like, huh? When we're doing that kind of work around being an ancestor and training and getting to know our ancestors and thinking about who they were, like asking questions about what they were like.
Yeah.
Like I asked my grandmother what her mother sounded like
Mm. Hmm.
because she passed away when I was 3. I didn't get to meet her. Also I was tiny if I did,
Right.
but I would have been tiny if I did, but I didn't. Like I know what she looks like there's
Yeah.
pictures of her all over the place, but I don't have the sound
Right.
of what she sounded like. So
Yeah.
then, as silly as it was, like my mom and my grandmother started doing her imitation voice,
Wow.
right? And I think that for me, I was like, oh, okay, word, like that's what she sounded like. So I have a fuller picture
That's
that's
so
almost
cool.
3D of like what she was like.
Right.
But like my dad, when I was working in person, it was with a lot of folks who were also the Caribbean diaspora. Kids can be cruel, meaning that my dad dropped his Anglophone Caribbean accent when he was a kid. So then, me, when I was working in the schools and I would go to visit him, I would just be kikiing, whatever, my usual self. And he
Yeah.
would be like, when did you get an accent? I was like, huh? I was like, again, unconscious, like, do 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 do. He's like, you sounded like your grandmother. And I was like,
Wow.
it's like, achievement,
Y-
achievement.
Yes.
Right? Because like I can slip into a couple of different accents, but the more prominent one is the southern lineage because my that grandmother is still living and my mom can do it, my aunts can do it, like they all can code switch
Right.
faster than I
Right.
can. The other accent that's probably super prominent is being from the New York City area. Because what am I drinking? I'm drinking coffee with a CAW, right?
Right.
Like
Yes.
that sound, but very much like thinking about the ancestral piece of like when you're doing how can I be specific? My late grandmother, her birthday was July 26th. When I started to do more altar work, I asked my dad what her favorite flower was. He was like,
Totally.
"Oh, she was really into roses." He was like, "Oh, well, I don't know. I guess it was probably roses, because she was, again, my grandmother was a Leo, which makes more sense now that I'm a girl who studies astrology. But when I was a kid, I was like, and again, like her outfits were very like
Oh,
uh, in the Southern Black tradition, like even though she was Caribbean, but like had the Sunday hats and it had to match, and she had her jewels and all the things,
oh,
like to the
beautiful.
nines. Or how would she say? She liked looking sharp.
Nice.
She liked
Nice.
looking sharp, like every crisp, and it was all the things, especially because she was in Florida. So
Oh,
it
yeah.
all had to be linens, all the things.
Oh,
So for me, I think that how we adorn ourselves, down to and including tattoos, because I definitely got a tattoo after I had a dream, um,
yeah.
which
Nice.
I've written about. It's my jaguar that's on
Ooh.
this arm, Kitty.
Oh, cool.
Um, because I low key am a cat 90% of the time. But I think that for me, like how it shows up in ancestral practices is like tangible things of like what flowers did this person like, and putting that on there. Thinking about what they sounded like. Or even in my father's side's case, like my late uncle, he had done like a couple of TV interviews or whatever, and I don't want to diminish it, but it was a very simple thing that I did. I downloaded the videos, right? So if I ever forget what he sounded like, I
Totally.
can just watch it, right?
Nice.
Which is why I also encourage people to archive,
Yeah.
right? I think that that's also a big theme of the project, and also even within this conversation around being in touch with our bodies and like recording whatever our bodies did or didn't like, what our ancestors did and didn't like, um, what they dreamed about, what they felt, what they didn't feel, what
Totally.
they hoped for themselves, hoped for us. Right. Speaking of like intergenerational wealth and legacy
Yeah.
building, um, yeah, like I really
Beautiful.
think that some of those things, and especially even in our facial features, right? Like who we
Mm-hmm.
look like, who we don't look like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I argue that I'm an even split of my parents, and then because I'm in a femme body, I look like my mom.
Sure.
But what ends up happening, and this is, how can I narrate this? From my eyes up to like my eyebrow, that is my dad.
Uh-huh.
For then my nose down, that's my mom.
Yeah.
If you put me next to both of them, it's plain as day that I belong to them.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I'm like a literal. It's literally like copy. I'll have to send you the photo. It's like copy paste. Like from here down is my mom, and then up
Right.
here, and like my complexion, and some of my hair is my dad.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
that also is a thing, and that can be hard for folks, especially I'm thinking of folks that are adopted.
I was just
I'm
gonna say
also
that.
thinking about
Yeah.
folks that don't
Mhm.
know who they come
Mhm.
from,
Yep.
and like how that adornment and like their face and like their facial features and like, oh, I look
Yep.
like this person, and like I'm super privileged to be able to be like, I
Yeah.
look like this comes from this person, this comes from doo. I'm thinking
Right.
about,
Right.
for folks that don't know, to, to set the standard as much as they can, to let their people know in that present generation or that peer generation, like that this is how they want to be remembered.
Yes.
And like,
Yeah.
something that I've done in my birthday season is like being very loud about lilies being my favorite flowers. Of like, bring me,
Oh,
like, come say hi, don't be weird, bring me lilies, do this, do this. And then
I love
in the
it.
sense of like, and in lieu of a birthday present, I'm like, bring me lilies, like bring
Yes.
flower. There's an Instagram account called Beretta Scott King. She always says like flowers for the living, of
I
like,
love
not
that.
just, and she's a wonderful practitioner, doula,
Uh-huh.
um, all the things out in Atlanta. She has so many different names. And so I was like, Beretta Scott King might be the easiest way on social platforms. But
Yeah.
I love that practice. And she's been doing it for years, of like giving people their physical and metaphorical flowers on their
Yeah.
birthday, because as a ancestral practitioner, we're so
Mhm.
used to giving our ancestors flowers.
Right.
We're so used to that, and rightfully so.
Right.
But we're not as used to, or we're growing into being comfortable giving people flowers while they're still here.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. That's beautiful. I love that so much because that has been in the back of my mind throughout all of our conversations around ancestors of like, what about those folks who don't know or don't have that connection with their ancestors? Me being one of them. With my dad's side, is I'm not as yeah, I don't have as much information as I would like. So that it just seems like the answer keeps being, then you be that ancestor. You start from where you are, and you know break those cycles and start the new cycles so that your descendants can then benefit from that. Yeah.
Yeah, especially because we're in the technological space that some of our ancestors couldn't have even imagined,
Right.
right? Where we can
Yeah.
like document all the things, even being able to record this conversation, right? So
Yes.
like, um, and this might be, the Libra rising in me, but like taking, documenting our lives, and like documenting, at the risk of sounding vain, I'm sorry if this comes off to people as vanity, but like documenting our joy, and documenting, in
Yes.
my case, like the difference between ancestors in training on Instagram and Veronica on Instagram is, on my page you get all the outfits.
Yeah. I
You get
want
all the
that page.
outfits. I'm like, you get all the outfits, especially in my birthday season. I'm like, we've been like, okay, all the fits all at once.
I
Okay.
love it.
Like, we're gonna dress, and
Yes.
again, it's a part of like what I just said about my grandmother. Like, I'm gonna, like, especially if it's my birthday, I'm gonna cut up. I'm gonna look good.
Yeah.
Um, I'm
I
gonna feel
love
good
it.
in my body. I'm at risk of my mom coming in here. Like, I'm gonna order another thing from another place on the internet. Then I have too many clothes. Like there's, I joked to my
Totally.
mom the other day. I was like, if I bring in like another box worth of clothes in this house, she's just gonna put me outside the house.
Right, right.
She was like, yeah, absolutely right. But I say that to say,
Oh.
like, um because we can document ourselves
Mhm.
much easier to document ourselves, especially our face,
Totally.
especially our features, like what we were
Mhm.
into, what we weren't, whatever.
Yeah.
And this isn't necessarily an endorsement for the metaverse, but I will say that the good news about it is that it can be an archive.
Yeah.
It's not perfect.
Yeah.
Very few things are.
Yeah.
Um, But I know for me, when my cat passed away, I was like, I know I have more pictures of my cat. It's like, I know I have more pictures of my cat. Where are they? And I was like, they're on Facebook.
Right.
Went and got them back, and I was like, okay, let me go, look at her
Totally.
through the years and like all the things. And I found a very,
Yes.
very nice portrait of my kitty.
Oh,
But like, baby.
amazing. Well, I enjoyed this conversation so much. I know everyone else will too. And will you share with our listeners how we can all support you, how folks can support you and find you?
Yeah, so we are ancestors at Ancestors in Training on Instagram. That is the main platform. We are ancestors인training.org as an organization on the website. Uh, if you go to the website right now, you'll see two very important things, which is one, we have our fundraiser for the deck, which by the time you listen to this, hopefully will be even closer to our goal. We
Yay.
are more than halfway there. The intention is to take some of those prompts that we just spoke about and reflected on and make them into something physical that you can hold and use in your
Beautiful.
ceremony or not, or put on your altar, whatever is clever, as my friend Jessica would say.
Yeah.
We're trying to raise 500. We're at 276 at the time of this recording.
Amazing.
So that way I can design the deck and get that out and have that be something that folks can enjoy in the new year.
Oh, so
The
cool.
other thing that people can get into is that we have merch, right? We have hoodies, we have crew necks. Some of them are tie-dye, some of them are one color. Some of them have some of the prompts that people really respond well to. We also have notebooks because, since we invite people to write, I'm like, we should have a notebook.
Yeah,
Like thinking about like fun things like that has been a really
totally.
cool and creative process for me. What else is important to say? Those are the main spots. After that, you can find everything else. We also have a newsletter, speaking of things that you'll find on the website, where I aspire to tell people what's about to happen before I put it on social media. And that's the incentive there. You also, if you join the newsletter, you get access to the Ancestors in Training syllabus for free
Nice.
99 without having to circle with me if you haven't. Because I've been very invested in trying to find ways to honor that folks aren't always able to circle. So that's why I was like, okay, if you donate to the deck, you're a part of that literally, and you get thanked in the deck.
Cool.
If you buy the merch, then you're outside repping all the time. It's great. Um, it's also fun to see people wear stuff that is not like my childhood home, because and I love them dearly, but my grandmother and my mom are like the chief like product testers that ever were.
Oh, cute.
So they're always wearing stuff. So it always tickles me whenever they're like, "Oh, I ordered something." I'm like, like I love y'all. I love y'all dearly, but I'm like, like it's cool when
Oh,
I see everybody like repping. And if you buy something, tag us and give us
yes.
consent to post and share the things.
Nice.
But yeah, everything that I design is already with intention, but especially it's with joy in the design. So I'm looking forward to being in a space where I can hire um, or take on clients.
Hmm.
Because folks have said this to me. They're like, "Oh, who does your stuff?" I'm like, "Me."
Me. Yeah,
Like me,
totally.
social entrepreneurship 101. We
Yes.
are our own marketing, social design, web
Yeah,
editing, you name it, something I
totally.
forgot, like admin, like just
Yeah.
all the things.
All the hats. Yeah.
All the hats, all the um what is it? All the hats, all the head wraps, all the bucket hats.
Yes.
Bucket
Yes.
hats.
Bucket hats are
But
back.
that's the one thing. Printify, if you ever hear this, Printify, because that's our provider. This is
Okay.
not a sponsored thing.
Yeah.
If y'all would be so kind as to make bucket hats available on your platform, I would be the happiest client in the world.
Totally. That's such a
Because
good idea.
they have dad hats and they have wool scullies, but they don't have buckets.
Uh,
And I love your platform, Printify. I really do. If you ever hear this, I really love your platform because I can just set it and forget it and it goes to people everywhere. But I would
amazing.
love a bucket hat, please.
Yes.
It's like the silliest little thing. People are gonna
Uh,
be like, "What do you want for your birthday?" I'm like, I want to be able to make bucket hats.
I love it. So good. All right. Well, thank you again so much. And
Thanks for
everyone,
having me.
of course, on all those, everything you just said, I'll put in the show notes so folks
Yeah.
can access everything easily and go find Veronica and Ancestors in Training and support, support, support.
Thank you.
Thank you.